Okay. What's going on, everybody? My name's Mangg. Welcome back to Hanging with Mangg. Episode 516. Yeah, we're just playing more Super Metroid. Why wouldn't we? I have not played really almost any video games this week. It has been dry as a bone. I mean, I've tried to play plenty of games, but nothing's really been sticking. In fact, really what I've spent most of my time doing has been tabletop RPG stuff. It's like reading a lot of modules and adventures and things like that. Yeah, that's kind of what's filling my head at the moment. So anyways, this week on this channel, Elden Ring, I moved from one mod to another mod, and Elden Ring Reforged was not that great, but Convergence is pretty great, so there's going to be quite a few videos on that. It's good stuff. I recommend it. And then we were doing Dream Tactics, and then again, it was just like, I think it's just part of my gaming slump, where I just don't feel like playing any video game. So I just didn't have anything recorded, and I was like, it's not even a bad game, it's just I didn't feel like it. So I pivoted to some old RimWorld videos that I realized that I never uploaded. Not that old, they're like 4 months ago. So I've got like 8 of those ready to go. And then just recently I did record a fun little new Cataclysm playthrough. So that'll probably get uploaded after that. And then beyond that, I think we're just kind of waiting for Space Marine 2. Really, that's like the next big game that we're all excited about. Yeah, I know Black Myth Wukong came out, but it just didn't really seem like my kind of experience. I don't know. Because apparently it's not a Souls-like. It's more akin to the new God of War. Whoops. Fuck. And yeah, that's not super appealing to me. And then it sounds like it's kind of somewhat of a boss rush. Not exactly, but somewhat. There's like 81 bosses in the game. And that doesn't super appeal to me either. So you know. Yeah, just probably not my kind of thing. Not something I want to spend $60 on to find out if it's my thing or not. I mean, it looks very pretty, for sure. But yeah. And that's pretty much it. They did release publicly the Frosthaven mod on Tabletop Simulator. So that might get recorded soon if I'm in the mood for that. Can't even go this way. Oh, I can go here. Oh, did I put on the fucking map random? No wonder I was like, my beat gate. Okay, I didn't want to play with the map rando. I don't like the map rando because I have to remember too much stuff. It's like a partial map rando. I don't know. Anyway. Yeah. Over on the Exploring series, we had Departmentalized, which was pretty damn popular, surprisingly. So that's good. What the hell? Crazy. And yeah, I'm really pleased with how positive the response has been. Oh shit, for my horror summary. It's really encouraging. And so I have finished the script for the next one, Incantation. I recorded it. So now that just leaves the dreaded editing process. But it should be released this week. It helps when I'm like not into any video games and just like, well, I guess I'll work. That helps. If I'm obsessed with a game, it's like, it can wait. And yeah, so that'll be good. The movie is honestly very close to the same length as Noroi, but my summary ended up being, hold on, where was that? Yeah, about 8 minutes shorter, 7 minutes shorter. So make of that what you will. I think there's more. Maybe there's slightly more just like creepy scenes that are like played out like a found footage movie, where someone's walking around like a scary location with a camera and it's a bit slow but it's tense. And for a summary, you know, that's like one line and then that summarizes the whole thing. So that could be it. The plot is not quite as convoluted as Noroi is. Although a little bit, because they keep flashing back and forth in time, like 6 years. So, the little... My parents would probably struggle, of course, to follow it. But that's what the summary is for. So yeah, should be good. Hopefully we do not get any sort of age restriction on it, or suicide warning underneath the video. That would be good. I did not use the dreaded suicide word. I obfuscated it a little bit. And yeah, so it should be good. And I also worked on this week a video about the Hanged King. It's been a while since we've heard from him. And so there's an article that's kind of a remix of SCP-701, and it's not too shabby. So that's that. It is nice though, like, you know, when I do SCP videos, I have to really be I have to compile this artwork and decide like what fits here and blah blah blah, and art, you know, pick art that I have to really peruse and make. I have to curate and blah blah blah, and it's this whole process, and I've gotten lazier with it over the years. You know, when I first did SCP and stuff, I tried to have very targeted, very specific pieces for each section of the article. And now it's just like, yeah, this is the general theme, so I'm just going to kind of dump all that in. But with movie summaries, I don't have to worry about any of that. I mean, I have to do a different form of editing that's still time consuming, but I don't have to curate anything. It's all just images and clips from the movie. So it's kind of nice. Okay, I see what you're getting at. Somehow I still don't have missiles. Yeah, so incantation this week, and then probably another couple weeks for the next one. I don't know what the next one will be. I kind of don't want to do another religious mysticism themed Asian horror. I'd very much like to cover the medium soon enough, and probably the Wailing as well, but they're all kind of similar theme, so we'll spread it out a little bit. So possibly the Triangle next. You know, I obviously I know like what the really big popular horror is. I'm aware of that. And I suppose I know what like really obscure horror is for the general public. Like, the general public has not seen well, Noroi, really. I mean, the general public has not seen Noroi. But among horror fans, I think that's pretty well known. Or, like, Gonjam, Haunted Asylum. I don't think that's... Basically, any foreign horror is not super popular. The mainstream. But then you get into Western horror, and I'm not quite sure where, like, lesser-known stuff falls into. What's a good example? I guess, like Dog Soldiers. Dog Soldiers is one of my favorite films. Dog Soldiers is probably the movie I've seen more than any other movie in my life. Which I know is kind of weird. We rented it. I had like a sleepover when I was like 13 or something like that. And we rented that from Blockbuster. And we watched it, and we were kind of, you know, freaking each other out during it and stuff. There was some joking around. We were trying to scare each other while watching it. It's not even that scary of a movie, but, you know. But yeah, after that, I just kind of became obsessed with it, and I just watched it a lot. But I don't know how well-known it is. I mean, it's fairly well-known, right? But does it count as obscure? Could I cover it at this point, doing obscure horror? Fuck. I don't know. I think my dad had seen Dog Soldiers, although maybe that was on my insistence. It's like, you gotta watch this, Dad. It's so good. It's Dog Soldiers. I'm still a little miffed that we never got Dog Soldiers 2. I remember making a big deal about it when I was in high school, of like, dude, as soon as Dog Soldiers 2 comes out, we're all going to go see it. I'll pay for everyone's ticket. We're all going to see it. And then it never came out. But it's probably for the best, because it wouldn't have been the same. And I don't know if Neil Marshall ever really did anything super great after that. Anyways, what am I talking about? So, you know, I'll be bouncing around trying to find somewhat obscure stuff. Probably easy to just come up with a metric of, like, how many IMDb user ratings it has. Anywho. So last week I talked about a one-shot I did for my family using Shadow Dark, which is the hot new darling of the RPG world. I think it won, like, Game of the Year at the Ennies. People are saying it's like the big new competitor to the new Dungeons and Dragons edition. You know, it's a real gem. And I think it's fantastic. I think it's fantastic. And even my family, like, I did another one-shot last night, and they never, like, really comment on the system. Like, my mom especially, she never can grasp... She can never, like, separate mechanics of a system from, like, the adventure we run. So, like, if I run a one-shot in a system, she thinks that, like, when I ask her, oh, what did you think about Shadow Dark? She thinks that it's all based around the adventure that we did. Like it's all basically the same to her, you know, as far as the mechanics go. Every system is pretty much the same. I think if I ran something really complicated, like Pathfinder, and it really got bogged down because of that, she'd probably mention that. But if the system is basic enough, which I tend to only pick basic stuff for them, it's all the same. But my nephew actually commented how much he liked the system afterwards. And yeah, they don't mention stuff about the systems too often. You know, obviously it has a lot in common with OSR stuff. It's pretty old school in a lot of ways. You know, you start with probably like 4 HP for your character. You can easily die in one hit. Classes are pretty simple and basic. Level to level 10 is your max level, and the difference between the character at level 1 and character at level 10 is more about, like, the items that they've acquired, the treasure they've acquired, more than their laundry list of abilities they've gotten from their class. Stuff like that. But then it just kind of does away with so much nonsense from old school systems and just modernizes it in just a really pleasant way that's easy to understand, especially for people coming from say, 5th edition D&D. I think it would be really easy for anyone that's been playing 5th edition to just transition easily to Shadow Dark and see the benefit of it. And like I said to my mom, and I said the same thing about Dungeon World, and I think it applies to that game as well, but you know, it just sort of feels like what you imagine D&D to be like. I think I probably said this last week too, but it continues to kind of drive that home. You know, just a game where imagination and creativity kind of reign supreme. And you're not bogged down constantly by rules, but instead you have a fun DM, ideally, that makes rulings on different things. And it's just so flexible, and I said, like, whenever I get back to playing RPGs with my buddies, like, this is the system I want to play. And I think that's probably a rising trend for a lot of tabletop gamers. Like, as you grow up, well, probably like when you're young, you don't mind just having a really flexible, light system that's just, yeah, whatever, let's do it, yeah. Just making up shit as you go. And then you get, like, high school, college years, and you start getting into more crunchy stuff. It's like, yes, give me more options, make things, give me more character builds, and I just want to theory craft everything. And then you get older, and it's like, you know what, fuck that. I just want to game. I don't want to think about too much. Let's just have fun. And so that's kind of where I am now. You know, obviously I like playing, like, Wrath of the Righteous on the PC and doing all sorts of shit with character builds and stuff, but in a tabletop RPG, it's more about just, like, the social aspect and the problem solving, the creativity, the imagination. And I think, you know, the OSR and Shadow Dark, powered by the Apocalypse games and all that, they really just kind of exemplify that more than, say, Pathfinder or Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. And so, it's really funny. Last night I was just thinking, we did a one-shot for them that was very narrative. I'm gonna die. Yep. Oh well. Luckily, we're just doing Hang with Mangg. Yeah, we did a one-shot. It was very narrative. They all loved it. They all loved it a lot. They loved the story. They loved the creativity. They loved the freedom of it. They liked the whole thing. Like, they were very happy. And I enjoyed running it. It was fun. But then afterwards, I was thinking about, like, right now we're in kind of a busy season for people until, like, Thanksgiving. So I'm mostly just sticking to one-shots with the people that show up. But I was thinking, whenever we get back to doing more of a campaign thing, I did get this. It would be interesting, and I know that I would love it as a player. I don't know how much they would love it. It'd be kind of a different thing for them. But it'd be fun to just say to a group in a game like this, you know, just give them, like, a map of the continent, of the world, or whatever, and come up with some contrived reason, and just say, for whatever reason, you know, someone lording over you, you know, someone that's got you by the balls or whatever, demands that you gather, you bring them, I don't know, 10,000 gold or 50,000 gold, and you have 1 year to do it. Now, 1 year I think is quite generous. And if I was playing with, like, you know, our usual DM, it'd be better if it's like, okay, bring me 10,000 gold, you have 1 week to do it. But in that case, the only option really is theft, which is fun, and that's probably what I would do regardless. But I think if you extend it out to like a year, you have potential for all sorts of other options. And I've never played like an OSR game long enough to know exactly how much 10,000 gold is in the long run. So theoretically, I guess you could just keep adventuring and keep dungeon crawling and risk your life that way. Because, you know, treasure is also XP, so you're just kind of getting your money, you're getting XP, you're leveling up, blah blah blah. But that's just playing normally. Whereas you could do some heists, you could set up all sorts of different heists. You know, you could rob nobility, you could rob banks, you could rob businesses, you could rob, you know, carriages. You could set up all sorts of fucking enterprises, which just appeals to me so much. And, you know, like in, when we were doing solo role mangging, my first foray, you know, I set up a zoo, and I started capturing animals. And that didn't really pay a huge amount of money. So I don't know if it's really a viable plan for a year, because you're not going to recoup your expenses within a year. But theoretically, if you could take over a business without spending much, you know, like some sort of hostile takeover, or like if you had, I don't know, if there was like a criminal circuit in a big city, and you could somehow just do a hostile takeover and usurp the head of the crime guild, thieves guild, or whatever, you know, you can potentially make a bunch of money that way, although that wouldn't be easy either. Because really, I mean, that would be quite tricky, because what sort of thieves guild is just going to respect you and be like, all right, well, he killed our leader, so I guess he's our leader now. That opens up a lot of issues. But I'm just saying, there's plenty of options. And so then I started thinking about, okay, well, like, what if this isn't going to happen with my family and, you know, that how they play? They would never really do this unprompted. But, like, if someone was playing Shadow Dark and they wanted to, like, build a general store, you know, like, we want to run a general store, or whatever, you know, how much would that cost? And so I started poking around on the subreddit, and then I started poking around on the OSR subreddit, just seeing what people said about, like, general costs for constructions. Because I know that was in Heroes of Adventure, like, by default, which was kind of shocking. But there's nothing in Shadow Dark for that. And so I got directed to a different game called the Adventurer Conqueror King system. And I didn't really read much of it because I'm not. It's a little too complicated for my table, and I really like Shadow Dark because how simple it is. But also, the designer of it, I guess, is heavily into the alt-right movement. So yeah, I don't really want to endorse the product, but there it's a lengthy book. It's an extensive book, and there is an entire like chapter devoted to characters sort of running their own everything. Really, you can run your own like business. You can run your own like thieves guild. You can run your own dungeon. There's a whole big section about establishing your own dungeon and having monsters like wander in so that you can harvest them for monster parts and stuff. There's a whole section about running mercantile ventures. And oh god, like I had to share it with some friends just because I think it's so funny to just see it in text. So, mercantile ventures. In their youth, adventurers are wont to squander their treasures on wine, women, and song, but older, wiser adventurers who have faced death one time too often for a bare handful of coin may find that their favorite type of venture is mercantile. And then, the riskiest, most lucrative form of mercantile trade is arbitrage, the movement of goods across long distances from markets where they are cheap to markets where they are expensive. Arbitrage traders must identify an opportunity, front the cost of purchasing large quantities of merchandise, safely transport it across long distances to distant markets by ship, and then find a buyer willing to pay enough of a premium to earn the trader a profit. Step 1. Determine market characteristics. And it goes into many steps. And, I mean, the amount of information they supply here. Step 2, determine the number of merchants and loads of merchandise in the market. Step 3, determine merchandise of interest to each merchant. Step 4, determine market price of merchandise. Step 5, exchange goods. Step 6, transport goods. And then it goes into, like, all the different market classes there are, from class 1 to class 6. And then it goes into all the types of common merchandise you might find, such as wood, salt, tea, cloth, glassware, all sorts of different stuff, as well as precious merchandise like furs, or rare furs, spices, porcelain, books, silk, gems. And then it tells you how much a load of that is. So, like, a load of fur is 10 bundles. How much encumbrance per load, the base price for one load, and then the different vessels that you'll transport in. So if you have a small sailing ship, if you have a large sailing ship, if you have 20 wagons, 40 wagons worth, how much that costs for you to purchase up front, the crew that is required for that, how much average cargo weight they can carry, the monthly cost for each thing is merchandise of upkeep and maintenance, and then your average monthly profits for each of those vessels, assuming that, you know, you are doing the process properly, buying low and selling high. So a large sailing ship costs 20,000 gold pieces up front, requires 17 sailors, 2 navigators, and a captain, and costs 525 gold pieces a month. But on average, you're going to be making 2,600 gold pieces per month. So a profit of like 2,100. So it'd only take you less than a year, 10 months, to recoup your upfront costs. But that's on average. And there's plenty of things that can go wrong. And so then, if you want to go above that, though, you can also establish your own domain, where you're actually the lord or the baron of a whole domain. And it has page after page of, like, the upfront cost that you have to... Okay, so... it's so nerdy and excellent. I love it all. Oh, God, there's so many pages here. So first, you have to actually claim the land that you want your domain to be on. And that's either civilized land, which is within 50 miles of a city or large town, the borderlands, which is in 25 miles of civilized areas, and then wilderness is everywhere else. And if it's wilderness, you can kind of just take it, but obviously the wilderness is often quite hostile in a fantasy world. So you have to, like, kind of make sure that the area of your domain, which is typically 32 square miles, is like kind of the standard size, because that's one 6-mile hex on a standard, like, hex-based map. So that's sort of the go-to starter is 32 square miles. So if it's out in the wilderness, that's a lot of land that you have to kind of make sure is relatively safe. And you kind of want to make sure that it's surrounded by relatively peaceful stuff. So it's pretty tricky to just establish a domain out in the wilderness without throwing a lot of money at, like, your garrison and your army. Whereas if you want to establish in a civilized area where it's relatively safe and peaceful, and you know, there's going to be other cities around, you're probably going to be in the area of a king, you know, that's going to have his own army and everything is kind of protected. In that case, you can't just be like, well, this is my domain now, I plant my flag, because someone else owns that land. And so you either have to get a land grant from the local ruler, which is generally given either through a pledge of fealty, so you're going to have to pay a lot of your taxes and stuff to that ruler, or you have to earn it in some way. Like if you save the princess or something, he might grant you land in his region. Alternatively, you can just buy civilized land if you have enough money, but it is fucking expensive. A 32 square mile area containing 19,200 acres will cost you, on average, 1.2 million gold pieces. So, yeah, tricky. And this is why, like in Kingmaker for Pathfinder, you're given your domain of just, like, out in the fucking wilderness that no one really wants because it's so dangerous, and you have to slowly, like, clear everything out in order to keep your domain safe. Whereas, yeah, obviously the really rich people just buy land in a civilized area because they don't have to worry as much about that. So then you have to establish your stronghold, and you basically have to have a stronghold. From what I've read here, there's no other way around it. But the nature of your stronghold kind of differs depending on what class your character is. So if you're a fighter, you have a border fort. Okay, and so no, if you're a fighter, you have a castle. I'm sorry, the classic castle. And that could be, you know, it can be anywhere. Some of the classes actually have to go, like the explorer class, I guess, has to have a border fort in the borderlands or wilderness. He can't set up in a civilized area because he's an explorer. It's against his nature. But so the fighter gets a castle, the mage gets a sanctum, the thief gets a hideout, you know, the cleric gets a fortified church, and this is your stronghold, and it houses, like, your kind of most powerful followers. So instead of peasants, you actually get, like, mercenaries and the fighter gets 1d6 first to third level fighters as part of his like loyal retinue at his stronghold. And so when you secure, I just like talking about this. When you secure a domain for the first time, whether you buy the land, whether you are given land, or whether you take some land, however you secure your domain and the land that it bears, you have to roll 3d3, and that determines the domain's land revenue in gold pieces per peasant family per month, because not all land is equally valuable. So if you roll really well and you get like an 8 or a 9, every peasant family that works the land in your domain will earn you 8 or 9 gold pieces per month. And this is from like timber, furs, stone, minerals, farming, all that sort of stuff. Whereas if you roll shitty, then the land is pretty barren, infertile, there's not a lot of natural resources. And so at that point, you could choose to just say, well, this land's shit, and I'm just going to move on. I'm not even going to bother spending any more money on it. But land revenue is not the only way that you can make money. Because if you have enough money up front, you could then instead establish urban settlements. So, you could just establish a city there instead. And I haven't read the entire section, but I imagine that there is, like, downsides to that process, where the land is kind of infertile and barren, and you just want to establish cities. The thing is, I think cities don't bring in as much money. Like, land is the most valuable thing for you. It brings you in more revenue than any other process. Because, like, services get you 4 gold pieces per family by default. And then taxes on, like, all sorts of different things can give you 2 gold pieces per family. And then if you have vassals, that can also bring you in money. But it's a lot harder to manage. And you have to have a pretty big domain, obviously, to have vassals under you. Vassal revenue is generally 20% of their monthly income. So, if you have like 5 vassals, it's like having a second dominion or domain of your own. But then you also have to pay expenses for all the people that live in your domain, and this is hefty, especially if you live out in the wilderness. Primarily due to your garrison, because you have to keep a garrison to maintain security, keep everyone safe. Because if you don't, morale in your domain is going to plummet, and then everyone leaves, and then you're left with nothing. So in a civilized area, your garrison's pretty light, and it's only 2 gold pieces per month per family. But in the wilderness, it's double that. You also have to pay your stronghold upkeep, which is 0.5% of the total value of your stronghold each month. Then, if you're in a civilized realm, you have to pay 20% of your gross monthly income to the lord who granted you the domain. In Borderlands, that number might be reduced if you are actively sort of defending the borders of the realm, and you're like spending money to defend the borders of the realm. Then the lord that rules over you might be like, okay, we'll give you a tax cut because of that. And then if you're in the wilderness, you don't owe anybody anything unless you choose to become vassals to the ruler of a civilized realm, which potentially has its benefits. That you're not completely on your own, because if you get under heavy attack, you might be able to call on, the king's army to help out. If you're a loyal and a vassal, I guess. But then you also have to pay tithes to your dominant religion, to the church of the dominant religion. 10% of your gross monthly income goes to the church. And if you don't pay that, the loyalty of your population will also be reduced. And you might be excommunicated, which is pretty bad. And then 4 times per year, at least, you have to hold a big festival, which costs you 5 gold pieces per family, which is also pretty hefty. So it's not obscenely profitable to run your own domain. But if you can establish it big enough, you get vassals under you and all sorts of stuff, and they're paying you taxes, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I mean, you'll probably come out ahead. And then there's a whole morale system. Various things can affect the morale up and down, and then that can cause, on the lowest end, that can cause rioting and all sorts of stuff. And actually, a bunch of the families will stop. Like, the able-bodied men in the families will stop working for you. You know, they'll stop working the land and blah, blah, blah. And they'll actually turn into bandits. And you have to figure out how to deal with the bandits. And if you kill them, then obviously you lose a lot of able-bodied men in your domain. But yeah, okay. So for a settlement, you have to just basically pony up a large amount of money. So the smallest settlement you can build, urban settlement, like a village basically, costs you 10,000 gold pieces up front and can hold up to 249 families. Each family is assumed to be 5 people. Then if you go up from there, you can spend all the way up to 2.5 million gold pieces in a massive city that can hold 100,000 families. And depending on the market class in your city, which is based, I think, entirely around how many families are in the city, you earn a certain amount of revenue from that, urban revenue. So that scales between 7 to 8.5 gold pieces per family per month. So it's pretty decent. It's pretty decent. But there's also expenses for that, which are very similar to general domain expenses. So you got to pay for the town's garrison. You got to pay upkeep on everything. You got to pay taxes to anybody that you owe taxes to, which is 20% of the urban revenue. Tithes are 10% of urban revenue. And then also the festivals. And so those are separate. You have like your general domain where peasants just live and work on the land and all that sort of stuff. And then you have your urban settlements that do basically all the same stuff, but they're contained within a single settlement. And you have to calculate that all differently. So they have a chart here kind of showcasing the various sizes of settlements and the monthly income you're likely to pull in. So a large village, 250 to 449 families, you're likely pulling in 150 to 264 gold pieces per month, which is not that much compared to just adventuring. Not a whole lot. But if you have a large city with like 12,000 families in it, you're probably pulling in 10 to 14,000 gold pieces a month, which is pretty good for not risking your life. Then they have rules for like non-normal domains and stuff. So they have chaotic domains if you want to run entire domains of like beastmen instead of humans or something. And so beastmen provide only half the land revenue of normal men. Beastmen in urban settlements produce only half the urban revenue of normal men. But the domain morale modifiers for garrisons and festivals are double. So they're pretty easy to please in that way. Then you're going to have a dwarven vault if you just want dwarves, and this has to be an underground domain. While it may include above-ground gates, walls, or structures as necessary for defense or commerce, these cannot constitute more than 25% of the GP value of the stronghold. You have an elven fastness, which has to be built in the wilderness and must be built harmoniously within a site of natural majesty. Then, if you're an assassin or a thief, your stronghold is a hideout. These are secret, so they don't actually secure domains. They don't attract peasants or anything like that. But instead, you become the boss of a syndicate. And so, depending on the size of your hideout, the upfront cost that you pay, it can support more thieves, basically. And these have to be built within 6 miles of an urban settlement, and you basically run your own thieves guild that does all sorts of crime within that other urban settlement. And so they have a bunch of charts here for the various things that you can have your goons perform. So you can do assassinations, you can smuggle, you can spy, you can steal, treasure hunting, carousing, and so there's sections explaining all this, how much possible you can get from revenue. So these are all kind of based on dice rolls, because obviously there's chances of failure for all these activities. Assassination, if it's successful, the boss collects a bounty equal to 1,000 gold pieces per level of the victim from whoever hired them. That might be the highest single payout, but it depends, because like smuggling, it depends on what you're smuggling, and so you do a random roll on the common merchandise table, and then you can decide to like smuggle extra loads of merchandise by taking negatives on the roll, and then when it succeeds, you collect a fee equal to 12% of the market value of the merchandise smuggled. Now, is that better than just performing arbitrage trading yourself? I don't know. But obviously, if you're running a thieves guild, you're kind of doing all these different things, and so you're making money from various different ways. And I think if I was DMing and I had a thief player that was up to this level, I don't think I'd force them to make a thieves guild. And I don't know if I read that they have to, if they want to make a domain. I think they just have the option to. I'm not quite sure. I mean, this seems to imply that they kind of have to. If the thief wants a domain, he has to establish a hideout and perform crimes. I don't think I would be that strict if I was DMing. If the thief wanted to go on the straight and narrow and just run a proper kingdom himself, like, fine. Whereas if the fighter wanted to be like, you know what, I don't want to run, I don't want to be a baron, I want to do some crime, I think that's cool, then fuck it, let them run a hideout. I think the idea is that the thief at this point is like a legendary thief and is going to attract a lot of other thieves. The fighter is going to be a legendary kind of warrior and is going to attract that kind of respect. Whereas if he suddenly becomes a criminal, it's like, you're not a thief. You've never done any thieving. Have you ever even picked a lock, dude? I don't know. It's hard to say. I think generally probably players will kind of align with their characters and what they would do, so it's probably not much of an issue, but I don't think I'd be too strict about it. This is unlikely to ever come up in any game ever anyway. So then there's a bunch of rules for if you get caught when you're running your thieves guild, for your goons that get caught and busted. And so then there's a bunch of options you can perform to try and alleviate that problem. You can hire attorneys, you can bribe the courts, you can plant evidence and things like that. And then it takes into account any prior crimes that individual has had, the severity of the crime, and then there's a big chart for like the various punishments that could be applied. So if you got a good lawyer, you've kind of handled the evidence a bit, you might get a lesser punishment. So even if you have committed like manslaughter, you might just get whipped. The criminal might just get whipped and fined like 600 gold pieces. But obviously, like, you know, some of these like the really heavy punishment for assault is that you're tortured and fined 600 gold pieces, whereas the lesser punishment for high treason is still execution. Then there's like this whole page about creating a criminal guild, which is a group of multiple syndicates under one boss, and there is rules here that if you want to take over a syndicate, so like I said, like you could just walk in and execute, you know, the head of a crime syndicate, but then it kind of depends on your charisma modifier, and you have to roll on this chart about the change in management chart table, which I don't know. It might be a 2d6 roll. It doesn't really say what roll it is, and I don't know enough about this game to know the dice system. I went straight to this section because it interested me the most. But the results there could just be they immediately attack you, or they want to betray you, or they just accept you. You know, it depends on your charisma. But yeah, so you could just do it that way. Then there's all the rules, like I said, for creating a wizard sanctum or a dungeon and populating the dungeon. Then all the rules, as I talked about, for like mercantile ventures. And then you can actually get XP from doing all these things. So you can actually get XP from running a proper mercantile venture. Yeah, that's all that. It's just so fantastic. It's yeah. It's hard to say because it's the kind of thing that I would just love. It's exactly the kind of thing that I would just love to do. I'd like to get to this point. You know, like when we played Dungeon Crawl Classics one time, and our DM had a funnel prepared. You know, he had like a pre-written funnel that he was running. And the idea was that we were meant to go into this dungeon. And he didn't start us like at the entrance to the dungeon. And I think that was a powerful lesson to be learned there. Because if you're running a funnel and you start them at the entrance of the dungeon, or better yet, they're like trapped inside of the dungeon at the very start, then they have no choice. They're going through the funnel. And if they're trapped in there, it's probably even better, because then it's not like, why are we in here? Let's just fucking back out and leave. If they're trapped in there and they have to find a way out, like, they have no choice. They have to go through it. But he didn't start us there, you know, and that wasn't his fault. I'm sure it was the adventurer that did it. Because I remember we approached this village at the start and we witnessed, like, this ritual that was occurring or something. And then that was meant to spur us to go to the dungeon to like resolve the crisis. But instead we were like, fuck that. Let's do something different. And we pretty much took over the village. Yeah, it was such an interest. I'm almost certain we were level 0 characters. So I have no idea how this transpired. But I think we ended up getting enough money gathered where we like started buying property in the village, I believe. And then eventually we did hit level 1 and I got the sleep spell. And Dungeon Crawl Classics is really fun for spellcasters because the spells are insane. The sleep spell, all the spells you can roll. You roll on this big table of effects, and so if you roll kind of low, nothing happens. If you roll, decently, you get sort of the expected effect of sleep, where it puts like a couple creatures to sleep for like 10 minutes or something like that. But it keeps going up and up and up. And so at the very high numbers of like sleep, you can put pretty much an entire town to sleep forever or like perpetually. So it's really awesome. And so we had a plan where we were going to just usurp control of the village or of the town from the leader, because we were going to go in there and I was going to cast sleep and put him and all of his guards and stuff to sleep. And then we were just going to like slit their throats or something like that. And you can do that kind of at level 1 because there's a concept called spell burn, where you can temporarily lower your stats. You can burn your stats temporarily, and you recover like 1 per day. So it's a very slow recovery, but you can burn your stats before you roll to provide a bonus to the roll. And so we went in there and I burned like every single one of my stats down to the minimum to add like 20 to my roll. And I cast this immense sleep, and it put them all to sleep. The plan worked perfectly, and we took control of the entire village. And then we had a plan to like establish an adventurers guild in the village where we would pay, I guess, adventurers to bring us monsters like in captivity, and then we would slay the monsters when they were captive, and that would give us XP, and we would level up that way. So we'd basically just exchanging money for XP through a kind of convoluted process, and that was going to be our adventurers guild, and that was how we were going to be high level. And then the adventure basically ended at that point, because it's like, yeah, okay. I mean, where do you go from there? But that was a really memorable experience, and it was really fun. It was very fun for me. I don't remember if everyone else really loved it, but we got a lot of laughs out about it because it was just such a strange scenario that we were doing. It was supposed to start with a funnel through a dungeon, and we just refused. So I just love all this shit because it's so outside of the norm of what you normally do in a D&D game of just, yep, we're going into this dungeon and we're going to save this child and get a cool sword and kill some skeletons. It's like, no, fuck that. I want to run arbitrage trading mercantile ventures where we trade chickens and spice. I don't know. Yeah, so that went on for a long while. I didn't even talk about the one shot I ran. Right. So the one shot that I ran is called Winter's Daughter. It's written for OSE, but obviously you can run it with just about anything. I think there's a 5th edition D&D version as well. It's pretty, short, tight one shot. It's really nicely formatted. It's really nicely written. It's kind of a little whimsical. It's not too serious. It's about this this knight that died hundreds of years ago, and he was in love with this fairy princess, and they were connected through this magical ring, and the princess is trapped in the fairy realm. The knight is a ghost in the human realm, but they can be reunited if someone gets his ring from his tomb and brings it into the fairy realm for her. And so that's what the adventurers are there to do. And, it's a short little tomb. There's not a whole lot of combat in it. And then there's a brief kind of foray into this wonderful wintry wonderland of the fairy realm. where you encounter the princess, and there's some hijinks there and stuff. Yeah, it's definitely, if you're looking for a great one-shot that's pretty introductory, not a whole lot of combat, that is a bit more lighthearted. You know, there's not a whole lot of heftiness here, and for us and my players, you know, I used my sister to kind of be the driving force to go into the tomb and handle this, and so she was all in on, like, you know, the fairy princess and all that stuff. She loved that. So yeah, it was really good. Everyone really enjoyed it. And there wasn't, like I said, there wasn't a whole lot of combat. I actually added in a little combat encounter with some bandits that, like, followed them into the tomb and wanted to rob them of the treasure they found. Just because, like, it was towards the end of the session, and I was like, they have fought almost nothing, and I'm just gonna throw this in. And it was quick. They handled it fine. None of them died, and they killed a couple of them. And yeah, it was very pleasant. So yeah, I'm all in on Shadow Dark now. It's a great system. A lot of supplements for it. Very easy to make new classes, new monsters, you know, new rules. Good stuff. But I guess that's kind of all I have to say. I did talk quite a bit. Just, yeah, really easy for me to talk about RPGs for long periods of time. There are solo rules for Shadow Dark, Solo Dark. So I might check that out. I don't know if I'll stream it. I might record it or something. But it might be interesting to just try some of that out. We'll see. We'll see. But anyways, more Elden Ring Convergence, more RimWorld stuff. Hanged King SCP tomorrow on the Exploring series, and a horror summary on Incantation later this week. But for now, my name is Mangg. This has been Hanging with Mangg. I'll see you fine folks next week.